Okay. All right, so we're going to go over biocatalysts today. And with that, we're going to end up having to go over a few different types of applications and things like that, and some keywords that you're going to see in catalysts, just so that everybody knows what they mean whenever we start talking about the catalysts themselves. So you have a few different types of applications for drugs, right? So you have and you're going to see these on press releases. You're going to see so and so ticker, announces that they've filed for an IND. So IND stands for Investigational New Drug, and that is pretty much that's the first stage. It's submitted preclinical. And when I say preclinical, all that means is prior to human testing, right? So we're probably still in the animal stage or whatever else, but it's before it's been introduced to humans. And this stage or this particular application is basically to determine if the product is reasonably safe for initial use in humans and if it shows some type of benefit. And then they have to submit animal pharmacology and toxicology studies and data along with the application. And they need an okay from the FDA to proceed forward through those different clinical phases. The next type is an NDA. We've seen that on PRs as well. And that just stands for New Drug Application. And there's another one. So people they're typically, once the IND is done and approved, and they're going to file for an NDA or a BLA. A BLA is a biologic license application. Pretty much they're the same thing. The only difference is the NDA is for small molecule drugs, okay? And the BLA, the biologic license application, is for biologic products. So that's just the difference. So it just depends on what type of therapy they have. It will depend on what type of license that they will go for, or what type of application that they'll file. And then the fourth one is an ANDA, and that stands for, you're going to see this less often, but you will still see it, so I wanted to go over it. It stands for Abbreviated New Drug Application. And all that means is basically for generic drugs. So there are still generic drugs that people try and get approved. They're not over the counter, and it doesn't typically require a preclinical trial, and it doesn't require a lot of clinical data to show safety and effectiveness, because it's basically copying another drug that's already FDA approved. So, but it does have to show that it performs in a similar manner to the drug that's already FDA approved. Basically, they're just copying that other drug, which is referred to as the RLD, which is a reference listed drug. So ANDA, just keep in mind it's generics, pretty much. Okay, so you also have an OTC, which is obviously over the counter. So basically, there's a set of regulatory standards that the FDA has, and if it meets that set of regulatory standards, then it can go through much faster, this over-the-counter drug. If not, then they will have to go through the NDA or ANDA application process if it does not meet that table of standards that they have set forth. Okay, clinical trials. Basically, there are 4 different clinical trials, and we'll go over those. Basically, phase 1 through 3 steadily increases in the number of patients or test subjects. So preclinical is, like we talked about before, it's prior to introduction to humans. And basically what the preclinical is, its goal is to answer pretty much basic questions about safety. And most of it is performed in a laboratory. So, we see PRs all the time that such and such got preclinical this or preclinical that. Just keep in mind that's preclinical. And just because it works in a lab or it works in animals does not necessarily mean that it's going to work in humans. And sometimes it does work in humans, but the risks outweigh the benefits. And that's what the FDA is looking for. They're looking for, hey, do the benefits outweigh the risks on this particular therapy? So keep that in mind. That's why a lot of people, when they see a PR, anytime they see preclinical, they just, they don't put a lot of emphasis on that particular press release. Okay, and then after preclinical, we have phase 1. Let me get into my sessions here real quick, one moment. Okay, so phase 1, it's a pretty small amount of patients. It kind of ranges between like 20 and 80. And basically, phase 1 is for dose ranging, okay, on healthy volunteers to evaluate the safety of the drug and, of course, any side effects. And they're going to do different doses to see what effects are there. And then phase 2 is a larger group of patients, typically a few hundred, okay? And it's a continuation of testing on the patients or participants for efficacy, effectiveness, and safety. And if anybody is not sure what efficacy means, it means it is the ability to produce the result that they're looking for. The ability to produce the intended result. That's efficacy. A lot of people get efficacy and effectiveness kind of mixed, and they are different. So efficacy is, that's the result that they were looking for, and effectiveness is how effective was it, of course, right? So some of these words, some people are familiar with them and some aren't, so I apologize if I'm giving you too much information on that, but just want to make sure everybody's clear. So in addition, this is still on phase 2. A key part of phase 2 is determining the optimal dose, right? So, they were dose ranging in phase 1, and now phase 2, they want to see how far they can go with the dose, and it's still the benefits to gain the maximum benefit, but not get into the area of where the risks are outweighing that maximum benefit. Because, they obviously want to maximize the benefits and minimize the risks, and they do that with dosing. And that's typically found in phase 2. So, phase 3. Phase 3 is oftentimes called the pivotal phase or the pivotal trial because it's pretty much the one that provides the basis for the FDA approval. It confirms the safety and efficacy of that particular therapy. It's a larger group of patients, up to a few thousand. So we have like 20 to 80 on phase 1, a few hundred on phase 2, and we're talking about thousands on phase 3. And typically what they're doing also on phase 3 is they're testing on patients that are suffering from whatever disease or condition for which the drug was intended. They do a blind with a placebo, and I'll explain what that is. So a blind with placebo means that the patient doesn't know whether they're getting the real drug or if they're getting a placebo, which may just be like a sugar pill, right? So they don't know which one they're getting, so that they can get real drug. The placebo is obviously the one that's is not getting the therapy. And you also have a double-blind study. And a double-blind study is really even better because the administrators of the therapy don't know either, right? So the patient doesn't know, and the people giving the medicines, they don't know either. So it's double-blind. And basically that shows whether or not the product offers a treatment benefit, right? So if the sponsor, and the sponsor just means the people that are handling the drug, the makers of the drug, or the company, okay? If they feel like the data is good enough, then they'll proceed forward with an NDA submission. And that it will contain all of the data gathered at each stage. And we talked about phase 3 being the pivotal stage. So phase 3 is the one that you really want to pay attention to. That doesn't mean that phase 1 and phase 2 and even preclinical can't run, because they certainly can, depending on what is presented, what they're saying. If there was something new that they found, or if they just had crazy data that was just unreal good. But typically phase 3, that's your breadwinner. So whenever you see phase 3 news, you want to pay special attention to it, because phase 3 is kind of where that particular drug is going to be made or broken. So that's the one that I always look for. There is actually a phase 4 as well. That's after approval, and it's just post-marketing and monitoring the public, people that are taking the medicine, to make sure that there are no long-term effects. Okay, so we're going to talk about a few different key words that we'll see in these PRs that some people may or may not know what they mean. We'll kind of dive into that here real quick. So let's talk about primary and secondary endpoint. We see that a lot. We see that such and such has a press release and they had top line results and it met their primary and secondary endpoint. Well, what does that mean? Well, we know it's good, but what does it actually mean? So primary endpoint, that is basically the main result that they were looking for, measured to determine the effectiveness. So that's what they were looking for. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you had a cancer drug. Okay, I'm just thinking off something off my head. So a cancer drug, their primary endpoint might be overall survival. Okay, so they may be looking for a percentage of overall survival increase. I know that GLSI had one not long ago where it had 100% overall survival on their breast cancer drug, and it ran to $70 or something, from like $30 to like $70 on that same day, just because that's pretty amazing. 100% overall survival with breast cancer was just amazing. So pay attention to the percentages as well. If you have an overall survival percentage, what was that percentage? We saw one the other day, that was a week or two ago, that it had an overall survival of 43%. And it didn't run near as hard. But so don't just look at what the primary endpoint was. You really need to be quick and read into that news a little bit to see exactly what the actual finite numbers are, because that's going to help it run more or less, obviously. So the secondary endpoint is obviously not as important as the primary endpoint, but it answers other questions relative to the drug that's secondary to the primary endpoint. So let's say let's use this same example for a cancer drug, that the primary endpoint was overall survival. The secondary endpoint for that same drug might be a quality of life, right? Maybe it didn't increase the overall survival like crazy, but it gave the patient a better quality of life somehow, whether it made them more comfortable, they had less pain, or they were able to sleep better at night. Their quality of life was improved. Or their secondary endpoint with that same drug might be a reduction in disease. Maybe the overall survival wasn't through the roof, but they did see a reduction in the amount of cancer present. Okay, so that might be a secondary endpoint. So keep those things in mind there. Top line results are probably not what people think they are. People probably think that top line results means, they were the best, they were the top of the line, right? Because that's what we kind of refer to. When we're buying a brand new car, we say, yeah, man, I bought the top of the line one. It has all the bells and whistles on it. Well, that's not really what that means. Top line results it refers to the top line of data that's on this form that is submitted to the FDA. And it's basically top line data from a clinical trial. So it's basically full disclosure of all the data and the results, not just picking positive parts of the data so as to disclose only what was favorable, basically. So that's why people get excited when it's top line data, if the data is good, because a lot of times you'll see in phase 1 or phase 2, they'll say, hey, we had overall survival on our cancer drug of 69%, and everybody gets excited about that. But what they're not telling you is, they're not telling you the data that they got back that, something else was bad, that they had really bad side effects, that, the people, were losing their memory, or something else was happening. They're only sharing with you the favorable parts of the data. When you see top line results, there's nothing hidden. That's everything is there. So that's why people look for top line results. But like I said, a lot of people get confused when they see top line results and just think that, oh man, it means that it went perfect. That's not what it means at all. So keep that in mind when you're looking at that. Okay, priority review. What that means is we'll see that in PRs often as well. All that means is that the FDA is getting a priority to review the application faster than normal. So, and it's only shortened by 4 months. So it normally takes the FDA 10 months to review. And a priority review is given under certain circumstances, and we'll go over that here in a minute. And it's reduced to 6 months instead of 10 months. Not that big of a deal, but can make some stocks pop a little bit. Okay, accelerated approval. So this one is definitely better than a priority review. What accelerated approval is it's for promising therapies that are made to treat life-threatening conditions, right? And they show a better benefit than what's already out there, than existing therapies that are out there that have been approved by the FDA. So it needs to be for a life-threatening condition, and it needs to show like it's looking like it's going to be better than anything else out there. Well, that's pretty tough to do, right? So when you get something that gets accelerated approval, that's something to look at for sure. Then they also have accelerated approval pathway, and that's similar to accelerated approval. The difference is that if you're dealing with let's say a very long disease course, like AIDS, for example. Nowadays that's a very long course of disease, right? Used to it wasn't that long, but then they came out with some therapies that they can, people can live with AIDS for a very long time now. So that would be an example of one that's a long disease course, and obviously they can't really collect data quickly enough to get their drug marketable if there's a long disease course, because it just takes too long, right, to see improvement. So they'll, in those situations, on those long disease courses, they will sometimes give accelerated approval pathway, which allows them to get it approved faster. Okay, rolling review. Another pretty good one. This is one to pay attention to, when you see it in a PR. A rolling review means that it allows the submission of completed sections of the application, let's say for an NDA, a new drug application. So as they're going along through the process, well, first let me tell you what normally happens. What normally happens if you don't have a rolling review is that they have to complete the entire thing. All of the trials have to be done, all the data has to be collected, everything, they basically have to be finished, right? And then that's when they've completed their entire new drug application that they submit to the FDA. A rolling review is they can submit it in sections or segments as they're going along through the process. Well, that's beneficial because if they catch a snag somewhere in the process, then the FDA is going to let them know, okay, well, hey, here's what you need to do. Here's the data we need. This is, the course that you need to take to get there. So that really helps them out a lot, because instead of having to go through the entire process and submit it all at once, basically they can fix your errors along the way. Think about taking a college exam. If every 10 minutes you can go up to the professor and say, hey, am I doing good here? Right? Well, that's much better than handing in your test and just hoping for the best, right? So rolling review is a very good one to take a look at. Okay, let's talk about Emergency Use Authorization, EUA. We see this one all the time. I know that a lot of people were kind of upset whenever OCGN converted their EUA to a regular drug application. Can anyone guess, after the basically from the information that we've gone over already, a new drug application was for small molecule drugs and a BLA was for biologic products, right? So what would a vaccination be? Well, it would be a biological product, right? Because you're actually putting a biological product into people's bodies to see how it works. So what they did was they scratched their EUA, their Emergency Use Authorization, and went with a BLA. Well, that just killed it. And why is that? Well, because a BLA is going to take, number one, it's going to take a whole lot longer. Number two, it's going to cost a lot more money for the company. And number three, it basically, it's just going to take them, they can't market the drug right away. Whereas when you get an EUA, it's basically an FDA approval. It's not a full approval, but they're saying, yes, you can go ahead because it's an emergency use. You can go ahead and start marketing, selling, administering, whatever else with the EUA. Keep a couple things to keep in mind, though. With the EUA, it has lower standards than a full FDA approval. So that's good for the company, but not necessarily so great for the recipients of the drug, right? And this is why we see a lot of people, especially healthcare workers, because they know about this kind of stuff more than your average Joe, that don't want to get these COVID vaccines that have only been EUA authorized, right? Because to get it EUA approved is a lot easier and less data, and it's just not as stringent as getting a full FDA approval. It hasn't been through as many, it hasn't jumped as many hurdles, right? So that's why a lot of people are kind of a little worried about getting these COVID vaccines. Another thing to keep in mind about an EUA versus a full FDA approval is an EUA can be rescinded by the FDA at any time they want to. They can just call timeout, and that halts everything. No more selling, no more administering, nothing. So when you have an EUA approved drug, just keep in mind that the FDA could rescind that any time they want to, which could obviously make the stock price tank, right? Whereas a full FDA approval can take years to rescind. So you have more time there. You're a lot safer. You would have time to get out if you did see that happening. Another thing, drawback about EUA drugs, more on the patient side, is insurance doesn't typically cover EUA drugs. It's something you typically have to pay for out of your pocket because the insurance companies, they just want to cover those full FDA approved drugs. Okay, so that's EUA. Let's talk about fast track designation. We see that all the time as well. A lot of people are like, well, what's more important? What's bigger, that one or orphan drug or 510K? We're going to go over all that stuff right now. So fast track designation, it's for treatment of serious conditions, and it has the ability basically to fulfill an unmet medical need. One that's not already out there, basically. But it's not for life-threatening, it's not for terminal, it's for serious conditions, and that's kind of a relative term, I guess. I don't know how the FDA looks at those, but when you see fast-track designation, it's for treatment of a serious condition, and there's been it's showing the possibility to be able to fulfill an unmet medical need out there. So some benefits from fast-track designation is they'll have more frequent interactions with the FDA during their development. Basically, they kind of hold their hand a little bit, right? They help them along the way to make sure that the drug is available as quickly as possible because it has that unmet need, right? And it's a serious condition drug. They have more frequent FDA meetings to ensure that the collection and the appropriate data is collected, basically, is the data and the collection needed to support the approval is being done. So they're kind of holding their hand a little bit through the process. And if the requisite criteria is met, then they can receive from the FDA a priority review or accelerated approval, which we went over those just a minute ago. Okay, so let's compare that with orphan drug designation. Here's where you're going to see the big difference. So I can tell you right off the bat, the orphan drug designation is a much bigger deal than fast track. So orphan drug designation, there's a lot of benefits that come with it. So it's for a drug that shows, so fast track is for serious conditions and its ability to fulfill an unmet medical need, right? Orphan drug designations are for a drug that shows promise for treatment of a rare disease or condition. And rare is cited by the FDA as it affects 200,000 people or less in the United States. Then they consider it rare. Okay, it's a rare disease. So fast track is for serious diseases, orphan drug is for rare diseases. Kind of easy. So they do a lot of hand-holding here, and there's some monetary benefits as well. So number one, they get a 7-year marketing exclusivity. That's huge, 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 right? And they also get a 25% federal tax credit on any expenses that they incurred during their clinical research, as long as it took place within the United States. That's also huge. 25% is huge. They also get a waiver of the PDUFA fees, which right now is almost $3 million. I think it's 2.8 or $2.9 million. That fee is waived. So it's going to save them basically $3 million bucks. Huge. It also qualifies to be eligible under the orphan drug designation for research grants. So another huge, there's a lot of money here. This is why you see orphan drug designations running much harder than you see fast track designations run. They also receive regulatory assistance and guidance from the FDA. Basically, they help them along. They help them not only handhold them through the process, but they also will even help them design an overall drug development plan, which is huge. If they're not, maybe this is their first drug that they've done. You may have a CEO that hasn't been through this before, and so that can be really, really big for those smaller companies where they're going through this for the first time, and they're not sure how to do it, or what the FDA is looking for, or how to fill this form out or that form out, or what their clinical trials should look like. So it really helps them that the FDA kind of holds their hand through that process. So and couple that with all of the monetary savings and the marketing exclusivity, orphan drug designation is huge. Very big PR that you want to keep an eye out for. An unmet medical need, I don't know, Sam. I mean, it would just be, so basically anything that there's not a drug already out there to treat. I don't know what an example of that would be, but or maybe there's a drug out there that treats this and it takes care of these 4 symptoms, but it doesn't take care of this 5th symptom, or it cures them this much, but it doesn't cure them that much. So basically it's something that another drug is already doing, but it's not doing enough, right? So it has an unmet medical need, basically. I guess maybe ALS would be a good example, because it's a terminal disease. There's no cure for it. I have a family member that just got diagnosed with it, with ALS recently, and his decline is scary, very scary. So maybe something like that. Maybe that would be an unmet medical need, that if they had some kind of drug that came out that maybe prolonged the life another year, or it made it so that those muscles worked partially instead of not at all over a period of time. Something that there's a medical need that's just, it's not being addressed yet. That's the best way that I know how to explain it, really. Okay, let's talk about 510K approval. We see these all the time. A lot of people will confuse a 510K approval with a breakthrough device designation, because they kind of sound similar. They're totally different. One is kind of a nothing burger. It's not really a nothing burger, but it's not near, 510K approval is not near as big as breakthrough device designation. And let me explain what the difference is. So basically a 510K approval, these are medical devices, okay? And they are the ones that are intended to be inside the body, okay? So work like breast implants, knee replacements, hip replacements. Let me think of a pacemaker would be another one. These are devices that get implanted into your body, and they stay there. Okay, so that's what 510K approval are, those types of devices. And all a 510K approval means is the FDA is approving them to go ahead and market that device. It's not a full FDA approval, but they can go ahead and market the device. The device, though, has to be substantially equivalent, basically just as safe and just as effective as an already existing FDA approved device. So look at this kind of similar to a generic drug, right? But with a device. Okay, it's a generic device. It's a device that's already out there, and it's already, let's say that whoever made the first pacemaker, then it's somebody else that came out with another pacemaker, and it's pretty much exactly the same as the other one, but maybe it has a little extra benefit here or there, or whatever, or maybe the design was a little bit different, but basically that's what it is. So it's not that big of a deal, but we do see 510K PRs run some. I just wanted you guys to know what the difference is. So let's talk about, since people confuse that with a breakthrough device designation, we're going to talk about breakthrough device now. So a breakthrough device designation, it's a big deal. It's more along the lines of orphan drug designation, another big PR. So basically, these are medical devices that provide a better treatment or even a better diagnosis of life-threatening or irreversible diseases or conditions. Okay, so these are ones that are like the ones that you get, pancreatic cancer. Maybe there was a device that went into your body or whatever that would cure your pancreatic cancer, or ALS. These are really serious diseases that are life-threatening or irreversible. And the goal, basically, with breakthrough device designation, one of the things that makes it so huge is the FDA wants to get that device to market as quickly as possible, because obviously lives are being lost every single day. That every single day that it takes longer to get that device on the market, if it looks like it's going to work, then they realize lives are being lost. So they want to get it to market as quickly as possible. Some of the benefits from breakthrough device designation are the expedited access pathway, which we talked about a few minutes ago, priority review, more interaction with FDA experts. They actually get a team of experts from the FDA that will handhold them through the process, help them along the way. And they're highly trained, and they're easily accessible. It's not like you call the FDA and then they say, well, hey, we're busy, we'll get back with you in a couple of weeks. No, that team is basically designated to that particular company for that particular device. They have their own team designated that will handhold them and walk them through that process. So breakthrough device designation, it's huge. Big deal. Very big PR. Anytime you see that, you definitely want to pay attention to that particular PR. And they also can get 510K approval faster. Basically, they can get approval to market their device faster than normal. Okay, so breakthrough therapy designation. This is basically the same thing as breakthrough device designation, but with a drug. Okay, and it's called breakthrough therapy designation. Another huge one, right? Very similar to breakthrough device, just with a drug, like I said. Again, the FDA works with the drug maker for the expedited approval process. They get rolling reviews and or priority review. They even allow smaller clinical trials because they want to get this thing out there as quickly as possible. So they'll allow them, instead of having X amount of data with these clinical trials, they'll allow them to have smaller clinical trials. One of the difficult things to do with some of these is once you get into phase 3, these companies sometimes have difficulty depending on what the disease is, because now they're looking to treat people that actually have that particular disease or condition that the drug was made for. And sometimes it's hard to find that many people. If you have this certain disease, well, maybe it's hard to find 3,000 or 2,500 people that have that disease to do these trials, because not only you have to find the people that have the disease, but you have to find that they're willing to be a participant in the trial as well, right? And also because of that, the FDA with breakthrough therapy designation, they are a lot more flexible on alternative trial designs. So they'll kind of work with you in every single way to try and get this thing to market if it's showing positive data. So on those breakthrough therapy designations, you can almost guarantee yourself that phase 1 and phase 2 data looked really, really good. So just kind of as a summary, FDA they're looking to for the benefits to outweigh the risks. One of the things that we can do, or that some people do, I don't do this very much because I usually don't have time to do it, and I'm not looking for upcoming catalysts because that's just not really the way that I trade. I just want to trade after I've already seen a reaction to a catalyst, basically. But what a lot of people do is for a catalyst that's upcoming, let's say for an FDA approval, or that there's data coming out, they'll actually take a look at the options action and the open interest on those options. And that can indicate, not always, but it can indicate how much of a move is expected, right? So if you look at a stock and it's trading at $10 and has a catalyst, in September, and you start looking at the options and you see a lot of options are getting bought up for $15 or $20 or whatever, and it's just right before that catalyst is coming out, that can give you kind of an indication as to what the majority of the market is thinking about where this thing might go. So, a lot of people are always asked, well, hey doc, this thing got fast track designation, where's it going to go? Well, that's one way you can kind of look and see. We don't know when fast track designation doesn't necessarily just pop out at a specified time. But if you know about, I'm just using that as an example, but if you know about a particular catalyst, typically it's going to be data coming out. Take a look at the options. That can give you an idea. Number one, how many options are being bought versus how many are normally being bought. Look at the open interest, and look at what the dollar amount of those options are. And the last thing that I want to make sure that you guys are very, very well aware of, and I know you are, and as soon as I tell you, you'll say, yeah, of course, because we've seen it a million times. No matter what the catalyst is, be it BioTech or not, it doesn't matter what we think about the news, you and I. It doesn't, be it good, bad, or incredible, whatever. It matters what the market thinks. So one of the ways that you can offset that a little bit is let the stock react. It gives you an indication that, yeah, this thing's gonna rocket up. Versus we've seen many times where we saw a BioTech PR and we thought it was pretty solid, it just didn't do anything. And we've seen some that had a really solid one, and the price actually went down. I think we saw a breakthrough device designation a week or two ago where, yeah, it popped up a little bit pre-market, but then it actually ended up selling off and went below where it was trading before it picked the news up. I mean, it was just crazy. So again, it doesn't matter what we think about the news. It matters what the market thinks about the news. So keep that in mind. Not all of these stocks are going to react to news just because it should be good. Like I said, we've seen it many times, and it's silly. I wish I remembered the name of that one. It was a week or two ago. It started with an HDTX maybe. I don't remember. But anyway, like I said, it got breakthrough device designation, and it didn't do anything. Popped up a little bit pre-market and then tanked afterwards. Everybody was just kind of shocked. So, okay, that's all I had to cover on those. And you see what I mean? That was 40 minutes just on BioTech, and I went fast. So keep in mind, you guys have this as a recording, even though it's not really a video, but I'm going to upload it to YouTube. It will be a video, but you're going to be staring at that same screen the whole time. But I understand that I did go fast, so if you guys need to listen to it again, it's going to be not only on our YouTube channel, but it'll be in our recorded sessions channel. Listen to it as many times as you want to, and go online and study them a little bit deeper. You can go in a little deeper. All of these things that I talked about here, there's more information to be had online, I'm sure. That you could check out it if you need more clarity on something that if I didn't cover anything. Okay, let's take a look at some questions here. So Sam has a question. Are options open interest and reliable, solid indicator what the market thinks? Well, I mean, sometimes, right? At least it'll give you an idea of where you can look for. And then we use all of our other indications that we look for on the chart and with volume and everything else to play that particular move, right? So, but at least you'll have an idea of where other traders are thinking that it's going to go, because if you have a lot of options being set up just prior to a particular catalyst, then that can give you an idea of if there's X amount of thousands options at $15, and then there's 3 times as many options at $18. Well, maybe $18 is kind of where they're thinking it's going to go, but it could go below that or it could go way above that. So it's not always a solid indicator. Keep in mind, Sam, with this stock market, man, whether it's a bad market or a good market, it's very, very difficult to ascertain where the top's going to be, because it's just it has so many different factors that come into play there. But at least it can give you an idea of where other traders, where a lot of the traders are thinking that it's going to go. Might be able to give you just an idea. So Anka says, since these are more new info, could you please post the document if you have? Which document are you talking about, Anka? I'm going to address Sam's next question there while you're typing that. So Sam had a question. Can anybody file an EUA even though the drug doesn't have an emergency application, just to avoid long FDA approval? Well, they basically, when they file that, there's going to be spots on the application where they need to explain why they feel like there's an emergency use for it. So they could file it, sure, but it doesn't mean that it's going it's not going to get rejected right away. There are parameters, of course. I'm going to stop the recording here while we answer some more questions.